In a galaxy far beyond Earth, humanity had made its mark among the stars, forging alliances with alien civilizations through diplomacy and understanding. The Sirhithian Empire, one of the most advanced species in the known universe, had established a tenuous connection with humans, a connection that, until now, had been mostly intellectual and distant. However, this connection was about to take a new and unexpected turn. At the heart of the Sirhithian Empire sat their queen, Nerel. Born blind, she had never known the world through the typical senses that others experienced it. Her people, the Sirhithians, were not like humans. They relied on a heightened sense of perception, a kind of inner sight that allowed them to understand their surroundings in ways that far surpassed human vision. But despite this unique gift, Nerel felt an emptiness, a longing that nothing seemed able to fill. As queen, she was expected to rule with wisdom and grace. She was revered by her people, but her blindness set her apart. She had never known the true sensation of human touch or the intimacy that came with connecting on a deeper, personal level. Her blindness, though not a weakness in her empire, made her feel disconnected from the world. While she understood everything around her, emotions, thoughts, and desires, she longed for the simple experience of seeing, of feeling understood by another being in a way that went beyond intellectual understanding. Enter Ethan Cross, a young human diplomat with the extraordinary ability to empathize deeply with others. Unlike most of his species, Ethan had an emotional sensitivity that allowed him to connect with beings from all walks of life. He had already made a name for himself as an ambassador between human colonies and alien races. His skill for communication, not through words but through emotional resonance, had made him invaluable in forging alliances with distant worlds. When the Sirhithian Empire requested a meeting with Earth's top diplomats, it was Ethan who was chosen to represent humanity. He arrived on Sirhith, knowing that this was no ordinary negotiation. The Sirhithian people were a complex and proud species, and their queen, who had been both revered and isolated due to her blindness, would be a challenging figure to engage. But Ethan was not intimidated. He had learned to adapt, to connect on a deeper level with others. Their first meeting was not as grand as Ethan had imagined. He was escorted into the Queen's private chambers, where Nerel sat, surrounded by the subtle hum of advanced technology. Though blind, she had an acute awareness of every person and object in her vicinity. As Ethan entered the room, she did not look at him. Of course, she couldn't. But she felt him, felt his presence in a way that was far beyond the physical. The air seemed to shift, the sounds of the room changing, becoming clearer, more distinct. Ethan was struck by the stillness of the room and the quiet power that emanated from the Queen. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she listened, absorbing everything about him, her heightened perception allowing her to understand his emotions even before he had spoken a word. "Ambassador Cross," she finally said, her voice calm and measured. "Welcome to Sirhith. I understand that humans have many questions about our people, just as we have many questions about yours." Ethan nodded, realizing that he was in the presence of someone whose intellect and power were unmatched, yet someone who lacked the simple human experiences that many took for granted. There was a part of him that felt sympathy for her, but there was also awe. "I'm honored to be here, Your Majesty," Ethan replied. "I believe we have much to learn from each other. I've heard of the Sirhithian Empire's technological advancements and the strength of your people. I'm eager to understand more about your culture, your values." Nerel's sharp mind immediately sensed the depth of his sincerity. She could tell that Ethan wasn't simply here as a diplomat, but as a person eager to connect. In that moment, she knew that this wasn't going to be just another political meeting. There was something different about Ethan Cross. Over the following days, they spent time together discussing matters of politics, trade, and culture. But as time passed, Narelle found herself drawn to Ethan not for his diplomatic skills, but for something else, his ability to understand her in a way no one ever had before. It was as if he could sense the loneliness that haunted her, the isolation she often felt despite her position as queen. Ethan, too, began to feel an unspoken connection. It wasn't just his training or the formalities of diplomacy that made him respond to her. It was her intelligence, her empathy, and the depth of her understanding. But what truly struck him was how isolated she seemed, how her blindness, though not a weakness, separated her from everyone around her. When the subject of human-Scythian relations came up, Narelle surprised him. "I have decided that I will marry," she said abruptly. "It is time for me to unite with a partner who can bring our two peoples closer, a human, perhaps." Ethan was taken aback. Marriage was not a concept he had anticipated being part of the diplomatic talks. "A human?" he asked, surprised. "But Your Majesty, we have only just begun these talks. What is the reason for such an immediate decision?" Narelle's smile was subtle, but it was there. "Because I need to know if a union can bring more than just political strength. Can it bring understanding? Can it bring connection?" She paused, her voice softening. "Can it fill the emptiness I've carried with me all my life?" Ethan was silent for a moment. He could sense that this wasn't just a political move. It was a deeply personal one. The queen, despite her regal bearing and wisdom, was seeking something she had never experienced, a connection, something beyond the intellectual. "I can't promise you that, Your Majesty," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But I can promise you that I'll try to understand. I'll try to connect with you beyond our roles." And that was how it began. The decision was made, and the diplomatic world buzzed with rumors of the union between the blind Scythian queen and the human ambassador. It was a calculated move, yet one that felt almost inevitable. Ethan, though, wasn't sure if he was ready for the depth of what was to come. Would their connection truly bridge the vast gap between their species, or would it remain an impossible dream? The wedding was grand, a spectacle for both their people. Dignitaries and leaders from across the galaxy attended, and the air was filled with anticipation. As Ethan and Narelle stood together, their hands touched for the first time, a simple gesture that meant more than either could express in words. Narelle's heart beat faster as the ceremony continued. She had never expected to find a partner, someone who could understand her, someone who could share her life. But here, now, with Ethan by her side, she realized that she might have found something even more profound than she had ever dreamed. But as the celebration ended and they retired to their chambers, a new reality awaited them. What would their union truly mean once the public ceremony was over? What would happen when they were alone together, away from the eyes of the galaxy? Narelle's thoughts swirled in her mind. She was no longer the isolated queen. She was a woman, standing beside a man who had come into her life unexpectedly. The night ahead held mysteries neither of them could have predicted. The day after their wedding, the grandeur of the ceremony began to fade into the quiet reality of life together. The galaxy had witnessed the union between Queen Narelle of the Scythian Empire and Ethan Cross, a human diplomat. To the outside world, this was a symbol of peace, a powerful political alliance between two vastly different species. But for Ethan and Narelle, the wedding had marked the beginning of something far more intimate, something neither of them had fully anticipated. Narelle sat alone in her chambers the morning after the wedding, listening to the sounds of the palace. The soft hum of the advanced machinery, the distant chatter of servants, and the occasional footstep in the hallway all blended into a symphony of life, yet it felt distant to her. Her blindness had made her rely on her other senses, but it also kept her separate from the world in a way that she had learned to accept long ago. Still, there was a new and unfamiliar feeling in the air that day, an unfamiliar warmth, as if something had shifted within her, but she couldn't yet understand what. Ethan, on the other hand, was trying to make sense of the situation. He had always been aware that diplomacy was often more than just negotiating terms. It involved relationships, understanding, and sometimes sacrifices. But this was different. He had married a queen from another species, someone with whom he had only just begun to understand. It wasn't just the political stakes of their marriage that made it challenging. It was the emotional weight of being bound to someone so distant, yet so close. Later that morning, Narelle summoned Ethan to her chambers. She had grown used to his presence in the palace over the last few days, but now she needed something more. There was an unease in her heart, a longing that went beyond their union. She wanted to understand Ethan, to see beyond the diplomat and into the man he was, to know him not just as a partner but as a person. Ethan arrived as requested, and he found her sitting by the large window in her room, her back straight, her posture regal as ever. Yet there was something in her stance that betrayed a vulnerability he hadn't noticed before. She wasn't just the powerful queen of the Sirhithian Empire. In that moment, she was simply a woman, seeking something she had never known. "I trust you slept well, Ethan." Narelle's voice was calm, yet there was a subtle edge to it. She was testing the waters, feeling the weight of this new chapter in her life. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure of the answer himself. "I did, Your Majesty, Narelle. But I think we both have a lot to figure out." Narelle turned her head slightly in his direction, her heightened perception allowing her to sense the slight unease in his voice. "Yes, there's much to understand, isn't there?" she said softly, her tone more reflective than commanding. "We're both walking through unfamiliar territory." Ethan could feel the tension between them, but it wasn't the same kind of political tension he was used to. It was something more personal, something raw. She wasn't just a queen now. She was his partner, and that realization was still settling in. "I wanted to talk to you about last night," Narelle continued, her voice quieter now. "Not the ceremony, but after." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had been waiting for this moment, the moment when they would truly connect. But now, standing before her, he wasn't sure what to say. How could he express his feelings? How could he articulate what he had felt when she had touched him for the first time, when she had shown him a vulnerability he had never seen before in her? Narelle could sense his hesitation. She had never been one to shy away from difficult conversations, but this was different. She had spent her entire life learning to navigate the world without sight, but this was something else entirely. She was learning to navigate emotions, human emotions that she had never known. "I want to know more about you, Ethan," Narelle said, her words heavy with sincerity. "Not just as a diplomat, not just as a political ally, but as a person. I've never really known what it means to be close to someone. Not like this. Not like how I feel now." Ethan's heart softened as he stepped closer to her. He could feel her uncertainty, her need to understand, and it mirrored his own feelings. They were in this together, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized how much he wanted to connect with her. Not because of their marriage, but because of who she was. "I'm here, Narelle," he said gently. "I'm not going anywhere, but I think we need to start understanding each other, truly understanding. We've been through so much already, but it feels like we're still strangers in many ways." Narelle's head tilted slightly as she processed his words. She had always been taught to keep her emotions in check, to never show weakness, to never reveal the parts of her that felt so human. Yet now, standing before Ethan, those walls were starting to crumble. It wasn't just his words that affected her. It was the way he made her feel. She could feel the warmth of his presence, the sincerity in his tone, and for the first time in her life she didn't feel so alone. "I'm not used to this," Narelle admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always kept my distance from others, even my own people. But with you, it's different. I'm not sure why." Ethan stepped closer, now standing beside her. He reached out slowly, not wanting to make her feel uncomfortable but wanting to show her that he was there. He placed a hand gently on hers, and she tensed for a moment but then relaxed. It wasn't the touch of a diplomat, nor a ruler. It was a simple gesture, the kind two people make when they want to show that they care. Narelle's breath hitched slightly at the contact, and for the first time she allowed herself to relax. She wasn't a queen in this moment. She was a woman who was discovering what it meant to be close to another person, and it was overwhelming in the most beautiful way. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed. "I don't know how to let someone in like this, but I want to try." Ethan's grip on her hand tightened ever so slightly. "You don't have to know everything right away. We're in this together and we'll figure it out. One step at a time." For a long moment, they simply stood there in silence. The palace around them felt distant, as if the entire world had narrowed down to just the two of them. In that stillness, Narelle realized that this was the first time she had ever truly felt seen, truly understood, not because of her status, her role, or her empire, but because of who she was as a person. And that, more than anything, was a revelation. Finally, Narelle spoke, her voice soft and filled with a vulnerability she had never shown before. "I want to trust you, Ethan. I want to learn what it means to have someone by my side." Ethan smiled, his heart full as he gently squeezed her hand. "And I'll be here, Narelle. Always." The days that followed were a mixture of quiet moments and quiet revelations. Narelle and Ethan spent time together, not as queen and diplomat, but as two people learning about one another. They shared stories, exchanged thoughts, and even laughed at times, something neither of them had expected in the beginning. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was something neither of them had ever truly experienced before. As the evening arrived and the soft glow of the palace lights bathed the room, Narelle sat next to Ethan, her hand resting in his. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. She didn't feel like a queen standing in a room full of expectations. She felt like a woman standing beside a man who had shown her the possibility of connection, of trust. "I've never known this feeling before," Narelle admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan turned to her, his expression soft. "What feeling?" "The feeling of being seen, of being understood, of not being judged by what I can do but by who I am." Ethan smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "You're not just a queen, Narelle, you're a person, and that's what I see, that's what I want to understand." And for the first time in her life, Narelle believed him. As days passed since their first true connection, the dynamic between Narelle and Ethan slowly shifted. What had begun as a political union, a marriage between two beings from different worlds, was now growing into something more, something neither of them had expected. The palace, once a place of formality and distance, began to feel different. The walls that had separated the queen from the rest of the world started to feel less like barriers and more like a space that could accommodate two. Ethan had grown comfortable in the palace, his initial sense of being an outsider now replaced by a quiet understanding of his place within Narelle's world. The days were spent talking, learning about each other's cultures, and sharing moments of peaceful solitude that they hadn't experienced before. For Narelle, these moments were both foreign and precious. She had always been a queen, always had people around her, but never had she allowed herself to truly connect with another person the way she had with Ethan. But as much as the two of them enjoyed these small moments together, Narelle knew that the world beyond their chambers was not so kind. The Sirhithian Empire, like any powerful civilization, had its politics. It had its factions, its leaders, and its warriors who operated under the belief that strength was the key to survival. And strength, in their eyes, meant power. A bond between a human and a Sirhithian queen wasn't something that could be easily overlooked. The first signs of tension appeared one morning when Narelle received a summons from her council. She had been avoiding formal matters as much as possible, preferring to spend her time with Ethan, but duty called. The council meeting was held in the grand hall of the palace, a place where the air always felt thick with the weight of tradition and formality. Narelle entered the room, her steps steady, but her mind elsewhere. The council members, all of them Sirhithian elites, sat at the long table, their eyes focused on her as she approached. Their gazes were sharp, their expressions unreadable. They had watched the union between their queen and a human with a mixture of skepticism and concern. Some saw it as a necessary step for the future, while others questioned the very foundation of such a union. The Sirhithians were a proud people, and the idea of their queen marrying a human, someone they considered inferior in many ways, was difficult for many to accept. "Your Majesty," one of the council members, a tall, stern-faced elder named Varlon, greeted her with a nod. "We must discuss the implications of your union. The alliance between our people and the humans is fragile. Some believe that your marriage may weaken our position." Narelle took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew this conversation was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. "I understand your concerns," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of sadness. "But this marriage was not just a political move. It's a personal decision, one that I believe can benefit both our people in the long run." Varlon's eyes narrowed slightly. "And yet, you have married a human, someone who has no true understanding of our ways, our customs, or our power. You have put us in a precarious position, Your Majesty. Our enemies may see this as a weakness." Narelle felt a pang of frustration, but she kept her composure. She had heard these arguments before, and they stung every time. "Ethan Cross is not just a human diplomat. He is someone I trust, and that trust will not be easily shaken by those who fear change." The room fell silent for a moment, the tension hanging thick in the air. The council members exchanged glances, but none spoke. Finally, another voice broke the silence. "I agree with the Queen," said one of the younger council members, a woman named Talia, who had always been more open-minded. "The alliance with humanity is important, but this union is more than that. It shows that we are not bound by old prejudices. If we are to move forward as a galaxy, we must learn to embrace differences, not fear them." Narelle turned to Talia, grateful for her support, but Varlon was not so easily swayed. "Embracing differences is one thing," he said, his voice laced with disdain. "But this is not simply a difference. This is a compromise of our identity. A queen should not lower herself to the level of a human." Narelle's heart tightened at his words, but she refused to let them affect her. She had fought too long to build her own path to let others dictate her life. "You may not agree with my choice, Varlon," she said firmly, "but this marriage is not about lowering myself. It's about finding strength in unity. It's about seeing beyond the surface and recognizing that there is more to each of us than what we were born to be." The room was silent again, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The council members seemed unsure of how to respond. Narelle knew that this would not be the last time they questioned her choices, but she also knew that she had to stand firm. If she was to be the ruler she wanted to be, she had to make decisions based on her own beliefs, not the expectations of others. When the meeting ended, Narelle returned to her chambers, feeling both relieved and burdened. The pressure of leadership weighed heavily on her, but it was nothing compared to the pressure she felt to prove herself worthy of Ethan's love. She had married him not because of his diplomatic status, but because of who he was, because of the way he made her feel, the way he saw her not as a queen, but as a woman. She had to trust that what they shared was real, even if others didn't understand. Ethan was waiting for her when she returned. He had been busy with his own tasks, but he had always made time for her for them. As soon as she entered the room, he smiled at her, his warm gaze meeting hers. It was a look that always seemed to reassure her, to remind her that she was not alone. "You look troubled," Ethan said softly, his voice gentle. Narelle sat down beside him, her shoulders heavy with the weight of the day. "The council is not pleased with our marriage," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "They fear that our union will weaken the Sirhithian Empire, that it will show our people as weak, as inferior." Ethan's hand found hers, and he gave it a reassuring squeeze. "People fear change, Narelle, they always have. But what matters is what we believe in, what we know to be true." Narelle leaned her head on his shoulder, allowing herself to relax in the comfort of his presence. "I'm so tired, Ethan. Tired of fighting against those who want to control my every decision. Tired of being seen as only a queen, only a symbol." Ethan turned to face her, his hand gently lifting her chin so that their eyes met. "You are so much more than that, Narelle. You are a queen, yes, but you are also a woman, a partner, and someone who has the power to change the world. Don't let anyone make you feel small, not even the council." His words were like a balm to her soul. She had always carried the weight of expectations on her shoulders, but with Ethan by her side, she felt like she could finally breathe. She wasn't just the queen of the Sirhithian Empire. She was someone who could love and be loved, who could forge her own path, no matter the obstacles. As the days turned into weeks, Narelle and Ethan grew closer. They spent their time exploring the palace grounds, learning about each other's worlds, and building a bond that was stronger than either had ever imagined. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the weight of their union felt too much to bear. But they always found a way to come back to each other, to remind themselves of why they had chosen this path. And then, one evening, as they sat together watching the stars outside Narelle's chambers, she turned to Ethan with a question that had been on her mind for some time. "Do you think we can really make this work?" she asked, her voice soft, uncertain. Ethan smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I don't know what the future holds, Narelle, but I do know that as long as we have each other, we can face anything." In that moment, Narelle knew that no matter the challenges they would face, no matter the pressures from the council or the galaxy, she had found something worth fighting for. She had found someone who saw her, not as a queen, but as a person. And that, more than anything, was enough.